Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. And in this video, you're checking out an updated build for the Sorcerer class in the Elder Scrolls Online. And not only that, this is a hybrid Stamina / Magicka Sorcerer build called the Battlemage, combining the two-hander with the Lightning Staff, along with both Stam and Magicka abilities from the Sorcerer class to create a very strong solo build with a lot of variety and flexibility. So if that sounds good to you, stick around because we're going to go over everything you need to know to make it work, starting right now. Alright everybody, we are back on the Sorcerer with an updated build for the Elder Scrolls Online Waking Flame DLC. We are back on the Battlemage. Been a while, but things are looking better than ever for hybrids, so I thought I would update a few of my hybrid setups and let you know what's changed, what's new, and how you can improve since the previous version of this build, which has been about a year. So let's go ahead and jump into the stats first. I'll show you the base stats. So you're looking at about 23,000 max Magicka, 23,000 max health, about 25,000 max stamina. Recoveries are decent for a hybrid setup. 750 mag recovery, about 1,500 stam recovery. Of course, if you can use tri-stat potions, that will go up quite a bit. About 900 Magicka recovery and 1,700 stamina recovery. As far as our weapon and spell damage, those are going to be equal on this setup. We've got about 5,000 unbuffed spell and weapon damage. Of course, with our crit surge buff on the Sorcerer, that is going to go up nice bit there to 5,800 spell and weapon damage. And then with things like our back bar enchant, that can go up even further, about 6,500 right now. Depending on your monster set and other things, you can get this over 7,000 if you'd like to do so. Check out the crit value, though. This was pretty good for a hybrid. 53, almost 54% weapon and spell critical. This is really good on the Sorcerer because if you're familiar with the class, your healing is dependent on some of your crit damage. So this is going to be very nice on the Sorcerer. And by the way, our resists do go up with our Hurricane buff to about 20,000 spell resist, 18,000 physical resist. We also have a variety of damage shields and other damage mitigation options. So defense is quite good on this build as well. In terms of your attributes, you can play around with these. I have 46 right now into Magicka, 18 into Stamina. And then for our food, we've got the Lava Foot Soup, getting the extra Stam recovery and extra max Stamina. You can also use something like Tri-Stat Food or the Gold Quality Bewitched Sugar Skulls for even more max stats. And then as far as the Mundus Stone, we're running the Thief for that extra crit chance. Thief is going to be a nice option for any hybrid setup because it's basically giving you 2 buffs for the price of 1, right? You're getting your weapon and your spell critical increased, which is really good. Consumables, we talked about the Stamina and Magicka tri-stat potions if you can get them. If not, you can just run with trash potions. I would probably have a mixture of Magicka and Stamina. That way you can use whatever your lowest resource is and top that off. Finally, in terms of the race, there's a lot of good hybrid options actually, especially on the Sorcerer. What I am using right now, it's going to be the Orc. Orc is nice because you get a lot of max stats. You get 1,000 max stamina, 1,000 max health, get some extra healing when you deal damage, and then you do get the weapon and spell damage buff, which is really good for hybrids. Now, the High Elves also get the same buff. You also get weapon and spell damage on High Elf and Dark Elf, so either of those would be a really nice option if you are interested in a hybrid build. And then also, I think Khajiit would be really nice on this for the extra crit damage. We have fairly decent crit chance on this build, both weapon and spell critical, so Khajiit will play pretty nice with this setup as well. I think that's all the basics that we need to know, so let's go ahead and jump into the gear sets next. Our first 5-piece set on this build is going to be New Moon Acolyte. This is the crafted set from Southern Elsewhere. Gives you lots and lots of good crit and weapon damage here, as well as offensive penetration. And of course, this is great for hybrids because it's giving you both versions, weapon and spell damage, offensive penetration, and crit chance. That applies to both your stamina and Magicka abilities. So this is really good for a hybrid setup. It's a great offensive set. Yes, you do get a bit of a cost increase, but since we are a Sorcerer, we also get a cost decrease through our passive, so it feels pretty good. And you can also supplement this with things like your enchant and your jewelry, which we'll talk about in a minute. So we're running the Greatsword on the front bar. 2H Greatsword. Why the 2H Greatsword? I think some of the abilities like Brawler, like Reverse Slice for solo play are going to be very strong options. So two-hander probably the best way to go on this build. And then why the greatsword? You actually get bonus weapon and spell damage from your two-handed passives. We'll take a look at that a little bit later as well, but that's definitely a really strong option this patch for hybrid setups. And of course, for the jewelry, we have 3 pieces of New Moon Acolyte jewelry here. We've got 1 Bloodthirsty, 2 Infused. For my infused pieces, I have 1 spell damage, 1 weapon damage. So balancing those, and then we've got the Bloodthirsty necklace with reduced cost for stamina abilities. That's just because our main spammable DPS on this is going to be a stamina skill, so you want to help sustain that as much as possible. Now, moving on to our second 5-piece set. We're using another crafted set. This is actually a bit newer. This is from the Blackwood chapter. This is called Heartland Conqueror. If you're not familiar with this, it does give you some decent hybrid stats. Here you got weapon and spell damage, magicka, stamina on the 4-piece. For the 5-piece here, this is pretty interesting. It increases the effectiveness of your weapon traits by 100%. So what does that mean? Well, if you saw this on my greatsword, maybe you noticed this earlier, my precise trait is quite strong. Usually this is about 7%. And with my Heartland Conqueror buff on the 5-piece for that set, this is now doubled, so it's over 14%, 14.4% weapon and spell critical. This ends up being a pretty strong buff. That's more than you'll get on most 5-piece sets in the game, that extra bit of crit chance. And I figured since we're running the Sorcerer, since we have Critical Surge for our healing, why not use this? We also have the Thief Mundus, right, which also buffs weapon and spell critical, pretty similar to just like an extra Thief Mundus. So all in all, I think it's a strong option, especially for hybrids. Depending on your trait, right? I wouldn't use this with any trait. I think Precise is probably one of the best ones to run it on. You could also run it on something like Nirnhoned. Maybe for more of a PvP setup, you get a lot of extra weapon damage from that. Also, Infused is quite nice. Infused will give you extra weapon and spell damage for running that trait. So those would be probably the top traits. But again, crafted set from Blackwood, pretty interesting set. I believe you need something like 6 or 7 pieces to craft this. And then we're just going to be running this on the body. So in terms of the pieces here, heavy chest. We've got a light waist, light hands, medium waist, and then light feet. Everything divines there. That'll be ideal. Then we're using the tri-stat glyphs on everything just to get the most stats possible. So I am liking this set for a hybrid. Keep your eye out for this. Or if you can craft it, pick up a set. It's going to be good on a lot of hybrid builds. Now, for the monster set, Prior Theoric is a new monster set coming out in the Waking Flame DLC. This is pretty interesting. It's decent for hybrids as well. Check it out. Weapon and spell damage on the 1-piece, which is always good. Then for the 2-piece, dealing direct damage with an area of effect ability. Creates a 6-meter shadowy whirlwind below your enemy for 7 seconds, dealing physical damage, and increasing their damage taken from area of effect abilities by 5%. This is really good, I think, on the Sorcerer since we have so much AoE damage. We've got Hurricane. We can use Brawler on the front bar for some cleave damage. On the hybrid setup, we have multiple AoE damage over times. So definitely a lot of AoE potential on the Sorcerer, which I think makes this monster's helm a pretty interesting option. I also like you get the weapon and spell damage for the 1-piece. So I definitely recommend you check this out. Again, this will be part of the Waking Flame DLC, so you will need to have gotten that. Coming out very soon, so keep an eye out for that one. Of course, we have the tri-stat enchants on these pieces as well, and a medium helmet and a medium shoulder. So if you're keeping track of the pieces here, the weights, this is something that I'm trying with my hybrids, and that is 1 piece of heavy. That's going to be the chest. This gives us the most resistances, so it just makes sense to have a heavy chest. And then 3 pieces of medium. That could be like the head, the shoulders, and the legs, or you could have the feet. All of those will have the next best armor value. And then 3 pieces of light. So I've got the light waist, light hands, and light feet. Why are we doing that? Why are we doing 1 heavy, 3 medium, 3 light? Well, we'll talk about passives in a minute. Actually, I have a full video I'm working on to talk about this, but armor passives are changing quite a bit in the Waking Flame DLC in Update 31. You basically no longer need like 5 pieces to get the maximum passive value. You're getting that passive for each piece equipped. So you can really, especially with crafted sets, I think you can mix and match your heavy, medium, and light pieces to get certain passives. So we'll dive into more of that in just a couple minutes. Just keep that in mind. And then back bar, some interesting options too. So we've got a back bar lightning staff. I feel like that really fits the theme of the battle mage, of the sorcerer class. And I would say if you have access to the arenas, pick up an arena back bar. So your two best options, probably Maelstrom staff. I'm running the Vateshran staff. This is really cool because with your weakness to elements, so elemental drain, you'll get an extra dot. This does a lot of damage, 2,000 flame, shock, and frost damage every 1 second for 10 seconds. And this is AoE as well, so this does a good amount of cleave damage, basically like a tether effect. So really cool back bar option. Like I said, if you don't have it, that's no problem. You can use another crafted staff or Maelstrom staff would be good as well. But there you go, that is the setup. So we got the New Moon Acolyte front bar and jewelry, Vateshran back bar, lightning staff with 5 pieces of Heartland Conqueror on the body, and then Prior Theoric is the monster setup. Now, if you want to see some alternate options, if you don't have access to all of these, check out my written guide. The link will be in the description and the pinned comment. I'll have some other alternate options there listed out for you. That said, let's jump into the skills next. On the front bar, which is our 2H, we've got Reverse Slice. Just our two-handed execute here. This does good upfront damage. It also does splash damage. Pretty low cost, which is good for a hybrid. So yes, definitely recommend that. Next up, I've got Inner Light, and this is interesting to run on a hybrid for a couple reasons. One, it gives you max Magicka, up to 7% max Magicka with your Mage Guild passives. And it gives you Major Prophecy for free, so that's an extra, I think it's like 12% spell crit chance now. This is really important to have. Now, you can flex this out for more AoE damage. Something like Brawler from the two-handed skill line will be very useful as well. If you're trying to clear your way through a dungeon with a lot of enemies, let's say a vent dungeon where enemies hit particularly hard, you want an extra damage shield possibly. But for just more easy content and for like solo bosses where it's more of a single target encounter, try out Inner Light. You get the extra max Magicka, you get the extra spell crit, which is good. And speaking of damage shields, we have Hardened Ward as our next ability. This comes from Daedric Summoning, and this is just one of the best damage shields in the game. It's very strong, gives you some good passives as well, and this costs Magicka. So if, for example, I had Brawler here, I could use that damage shield if I had enough stamina, or if my stamina was too low, I could use Hardened Ward and get a damage shield that way. So damage shields are a very important skill to have, especially if you're playing solo content. And the hybrid actually can make use of either stamina or magicka. So that's definitely a good option there. Next up, Wrecking Blow is going to be our single target DPS ability. So that comes from the two-handed skill line. And you can actually run either morph here. I just am trying out Wrecking Blow for the Empower. That's increasing the damage of my light and heavy attacks by 40%. Pretty good buff in PvE content. You can also, of course, run Dizzying Swing that gives you an off-balance proc on an enemy, which can be pretty useful too. You can also run, if you're not a fan of this, something like Crystal Weapon, which I've run on earlier versions of this build. Crystal Weapon is still good. You get a good debuff on your target. Also, this makes your next ability cost less, which can be really nice, especially running New Moon Acolyte on the front bar. But I just felt the damage was a little bit lacking compared to Wrecking Blow, but definitely play around with both, see what you like, because Crystal Weapon can give you some good passive bonuses. And then Camo Hunter is going to be our last normal ability. Comes from Fighters Guild. Our second to last ability there, and again, Major Savagery. So just like we are slotting Inner Light, Major Savagery is going to give you that weapon crit chance, so about 10-12% weapon critical. Plus Minor Berserk if you get in a hit from the side or behind an enemy, which is 5% bonus damage. So really good ability there. Now, as far as the ultimate, one of my favorites now is Flawless Dawnbreaker for a hybrid. Why? Well, you get a lot of good upfront damage and damage over time, which there's a lot of other abilities on this setup, which is great. But after activating, you can see the buff there, 300 weapon and spell damage for 20 seconds. That's going to help you get closer to that 7k weapon and spell damage mark, which is really strong on this build. That buff is just so good on a hybrid. It's hard to not use this. We will have another back bar option from the Sorcerer class, but for a lot of content, I'll be using Flawless Dawnbreaker. So let's go ahead and switch over to the back bar now. We've got Unstable Wall of Elements is our first ability. That's from the Destruction Staff. So there you go. You can use the other morph of this if you're more comfortable. That's called Elemental Blockade. That will last longer. This morph, though, gives you more damage. It gives you an AoE explosion, which, again, that's going to be buffed by some of our AoE passives and damage sources here. Along with that, we are adding Elemental Drain. Of course, Elemental Drain gives you Major Breach. So this is an important debuff to have, especially on bosses or on elite enemies. This is going to give you stronger penetration against them, which means you do more damage overall. So this is very important. Not only that, it gives you minor Magicka steal, so some extra sustain. And then this is also how we proc our Vateshran's staff. So more damage, more AoE damage over time. If you're not sure what that looks like, here's the ability. There's the staff proc. Again, anything that's in between me and the tether and the main enemy is going to take that damage over time effect. What else? Lightning Flood. So we might as well use some more Sorcerer Magicka abilities since we are a hybrid. So Lightning Flood comes from Storm Calling. This is just more AoE damage, AoE shock damage. And then finally, our two buffs are also from the Storm Calling skill line. We've got Hurricane for our major armor buff, as well as some speed and some AoE damage. And then we have Critical Surge, which is our major damage buff, major brutality, and sorcery. Great for hybrids because you get both sources of damage. And anytime we do a crit strike, which will be quite a lot, we'll get 3,300 healing. And of course, that can scale up. That can actually crit for a lot more healing. Finally, our back bar ultimate. Let's talk about Greater Storm Atronach. One of my favorite ultimates of all time, actually, in this game. I really like it because of the duration. 25 seconds, you have this Atronach on the ground fighting for you. This is basically an extra dot, like a 25-second dot. Does great single target damage and also an AoE ground effect. And basically the fact that this lasts so long, while it's on the ground, you're also gaining ultimate back. So you can almost get another one off by the time this Atronach disappears, or you'll definitely have enough to use your Dawnbreaker if you prefer to use that. So great back bar ultimate, great for longer fights or boss fights where you need some extra single target damage. All right, awesome. I think that covers the main abilities. Let's talk about the basic rotation next. So you do have a couple of buffs. It's fairly simple, though. You just have Hurricane, Crit Surge on your back bar. This is the two main buffs you'll need to maintain. Crit Surge lasts about 30 seconds. Hurricane lasts about 15 seconds. So a little tip here is that you'll need to recast Hurricane 2 times for every one time that you buff your Crit Surge. Just keep that in mind. And then your back bar dots. 1, 2, 3. Front bar is just Wrecking Blow spam. Probably about 4 or 5 of these. Once you get back there, go ahead and rebuff. Redo your back bar dots. And then back to the front bar. Use your potion when you need it. Use your ultimate when it's ready. And just keep doing that. It's pretty simple rotation. All right, let's jump into the passive skills next. What do you need on the Sorcerer Hybrid to make this work? Well, there's a lot of great passives, actually, in the Sorcerer class skill line. So first of all, Unholy Knowledge is essential. This is going to reduce the cost of your abilities. Great for hybrids. Make sure to pick this up. Blood Magic is really useful if you're using one of these skills. So especially early on as you're leveling up, Crystal Weapon can be very good because it also gives you a heal from this Blood Magic passive. That's really useful. Persistence is pretty decent. It can reduce your cost after you block. Exploitation, only if you're really using a dark magic ability would you need this, but it can give you some extra crit chance. Now for Daedric Summoning, Rebate is decent if you're using pets. Power Stone is a must-have. This gives you a cost reduction of 15% on your ultimate skills. Definitely get that guy. Daedric Protection is great. Passive Stam Recovery and Health Recovery. This will go really good on this build. Make sure, though, you have at least one Daedric Summoning ability slotted. So on the front bar, you want, like we said, your Damage Shield, Hardened Ward. On the back bar, you want the ultimate, Greater Storm Atronach. That way you can make use of that Daedric Protection passive. And Expert Summoner, I'm not using a pet on this build, though you definitely could. Though you'll lose some bar slots, which is a little bit tough on a hybrid. But it is nice for the extra max health if you do want to use a pet. And then Storm Calling. These are all really good, honestly. Capacitor for the extra mag recovery, yes. Energize for the extra physical and shock damage, yes and yes. Amplitude, yes, for the increased damage done, and then Expert Mage for the extra weapon and spell damage. Yes, you'll definitely want your two-handed passives as well as Destruction Staff passives as our two main weapons here. And let's talk about armor passives. Promise we would mention this. Now, my thinking here is you want a balance of these, and you can start doing this now in the Waking Flame DLC. One of the biggest changes, let's talk about medium armor first. So one of the biggest changes is you no longer get critical chance from dexterity. You now get crit damage done and crit healing done, which is actually pretty good on this build. But you definitely want some crit chance as well. So where the crit chance moved was light armor. And so that's why I'm actually wearing 3 pieces of light armor. In Prodigy, increases your weapon and spell crit rating by 219 for each piece of light armor. So I'm getting some extra weapon and spell crit chance here from Prodigy. I'm also getting a decent amount of physical and spell penetration from the concentration passive. Now this, you no longer need 5 light pieces to unlock this. It's just per piece of light armor equipped. That's why I think, again, wearing a few pieces of light armor makes sense on the hybrid. You also get some other great stuff as well. Grace reduces your snares on you, reduces the cost of sprint. You get more Magicka recovery and Magicka cost reduction and extra spell resist. And this is all with 3 pieces of light. So I think this is a pretty good balance. Again, we got 3 pieces of medium. We're getting that extra crit damage and crit healing. That's great for crit surge. We're getting extra stam recovery and stam cost reduction. Agility is giving us 6% bonus weapon and spell damage. This is another new addition for Waking Flame. It used to be this just gave you weapon damage. Now it's giving you both. So that's a really interesting option for hybrids. And then athletics does give you some cost reduction for sprint and roll dodge, which is useful also. So a little bit of a mix there. And then, like I said, 1 piece of heavy is nice for some of the extra stats here. Not really essential. If you don't have the points, you could probably save these. Honestly, what we're wanting the heavy for more so is the Undaunted metal passive. So having all 3 pieces of armor equipped, at least 1 of each, gives you up to 6% max health, stamina, and magicka. So great for a hybrid build. Let's see, other guild passives. Yeah, actually, Slayer is pretty good on this setup since we're running 2 front bar abilities. You get another 6% weapon and spell damage. That's really good. Banish the Wicked, you get 3 ultimate per kill since you have a Fighter's Guild ability slotted on your front bar. That's also good. Those will be the main 2 there. Mage's Guild, if you are running Mage Light, like we mentioned, you can actually get some extra max magicka and magicka recovery from the controller passive. That'd be the main one I would pick up. Sigil Quarter we're not using. You could run something like Temporal Guard on the front bar for more defense if you wanted to. All right, we already talked about the racial skills. You want all of those. And then Alchemy, Medicinal Use. That's important for the extra potion duration. Talking about champion points next, let's jump into the green tree. Just my standard setup for green. My slotteds, I got Steed's Blessing, Liquid Efficiency, Rationer, and Treasure Hunter. For some passives, I usually start down here, Gilded Fingers, Fortune's Favor, and you can actually add a little bit here. Breakfall is decent. You know, this is all really just quality of life bonuses for your character, so you feel free to customize this. Also, by the way, if you want to see any lower champion point loadouts, like 300, 600, 900, or 1200 CP, I'll have those listed in the written guide. Make sure to check out the link for that. Now, in terms of the blue tree, we'll usually start here. So Precision gives you extra crit chance. Then you want to jump over to Extended Might and start with Piercing for the extra penetration. And that will let you unlock your damage stars, your blue slottables here. All of these are really good on this setup. Biting Aura gives you extra AoE damage. Deadly Aim gives you extra single target damage. Thaumaturge gives us extra dot damage. This is going to buff pretty much everything we do. For your 4th blue slotted star, a couple of options. You could go with Master at Arms. What I like, just to increase my buff stats a little bit, Untamed Aggression for the extra weapon and spell damage. That's good for hybrids. You can also do Wrathful Strikes. That'll give you a little bit of extra weapon and spell damage applied directly to your damaging abilities, which probably would be quite good on this build, in fact. And if you have any more champion points beyond those, then you want to start investing in your stats and your defensive passives. So As far as stats, you can actually unlock 2 here. Tireless Discipline is max stamina. Eldritch Insight is max Magicka, so I usually pick up both of those on a hybrid. And then once you go in here, Staving Death will give you quick recovery from our healing taken. Preparation for damage reduction. 10% is a huge buff, especially for a solo build like this. You might actually want to get this a little bit earlier if you're having trouble with survival. Elemental Aegis and then Hardy give you some extra resistances. And I forgot to mention too, over an extended might, just if you have enough points, you can go over here to Mighty. This will buff your physical attacks, and then War Mage, this will buff your elemental attacks. Pretty basic setup there in the blue tree. Let's talk about the red tree. A few things are changing for the Waking Flame DLC. You might notice these new sub-constellations. There's actually 3 new sub-constellations. But I still feel like the best CP stars in the red tree, at least for this build. Boundless Vitality for the extra health. This is always going to be great for a solo build. The more health you have, the better. Then this is going to be changed to Fortified. I believe it's called Ironclad right now. About 1,800 extra physical and spell resist is very good. Rejuvenation is getting cut slightly in the next update. It's going to be 90 health, magicka, and stamina recovery. But again, you're getting all 3 sources of recovery, which is important to a hybrid build, so I would probably still use this. And then as far as your 4th one, usually I'll pick up Bastion because this, as the Sorcerer class, it's a little bit more focused on those damage shields. Again, either Brawler or Hardened Ward, or you can actually choose to run both. This will give you a good bonus to either of those for the Bastion CP star. And then you can go down to Sprinter, pick up Hasty, and pick up Hero's Vigor for the extra max health. So that's kind of the ideal loadout for these. Again, if you want to see something with less CP, I will have different versions of this for 300, 600, 900, and 1200 champion points. Those are over in the written guide, so click on the link down below if you want to see those. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the outfit style for this setup. Now, I really like the helmet and shoulders. By the way, this is going to be the default style for Prior Theoric, the monster set. So that looks pretty good in my opinion. Now, I've tried to find something that would sort of match that, and I felt like Ebony was a good choice. So we're using actually the Ebony style, and I think these are all in heavy armor. So let's see, heavy chest, the heavy gloves, heavy waist, heavy legs, and heavy feet. Yes, and again, that's all in the Ebony style. And then for the two-hander, that's going to be the Honor Guard Greatsword. All right, everybody, and with that, that's going to wrap up our Battlemage build update for the Sorcerer class in the Elder Scrolls Online. Hope you all enjoyed this one. Of course, if you did, don't forget to crush that like button and leave a comment. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Now, if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer those, but keep in mind we also have a full written guide over at hacktheminotaur.com. Check out the link in the description and the pinned comment for that. In the written guide, we go over alternate gear options, different skills, champion point loadouts for 300, 600, 900, and 1200 CP, as well as a full companion build. You can definitely take this setup to the next level. Before we go, big shout out to our channel members. Thank you all so much for your support, and if you're part of our Tier 2 Elite Squad, make sure to check out our members-only videos. I just posted a full Vet Dungeon solo walkthrough on the Battlemage, so you can see how the build plays. Once again, thanks to everybody for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.